Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into a cosmic joke of absolutely epic proportions. I'm going to be your guide for this one, and we're adopting the rather mocking, theatrical perspective of a character known as the Wit. We're going to totally deconstruct this deliciously tragic graphic novel, tracing the classic character arc of a fascinatingly doomed figure, Cynos the Pale Cynic. It's a dark, incredibly vivid look at the architecture of the mind, and honestly, I cannot wait to tear his little fortress down with you.
Let's start by just lifting the curtain on this whole Gothic tragedy. We are going to expose the entirely unearned majesty of an architect who literally built a universe out of his own hollow fears, and pay close attention to the color symbolism right from the jump, you know? Those black, mocking priestly robes. It perfectly sets the stage for this classic tale of a tragic figure desperately trying to cloak his deepest insecurities in a fake, colorless facade of authority.
Act 1. The Pale Architect's Disdain.
So at the very dawn of thought, our protagonist, Cynos, faces this stark internal conflict. On one hand, his ultimate goal is static control. He sees himself as a creature of pure, cold intellect who just craves absolute stillness, a permanent, unchanging blueprint of logic. But on the other hand, there's how he views actual, vibrant reality. He calls it a tasteless broth. To his sterile, clinical eyes, the beautiful celestial dance of the universe is just this messy, meaningless error. But here's the real, delicious truth of it all. That disdain? It's just masking a deep, hollow fear. He is terrified of the universe's natural, unpredictable chaos and utterly dreads the eventual stillness of all things.
The rigid, logical cage. To cure this pathetic fear of his, Cynos decides to play God, stepping up as the architect of the void. But, as in all great classic tragedies, the solution he comes up with is way darker than the problem. He actually forges a twisted, dark pact to get what he wants. He aligns with the creed of the mind, which acts as the id, this raw, driving force of control. Then he brings in the truth-telling monster, representing the superego, acting as this uncompromising judge. Together, they author what he calls the creed of the cosmic mind. This is supposed to be his master architecture, right? An immutable blueprint meant to forcibly bind the fluid, chaotic spirit of existence.
So how does he actually pull this off? Well, he imposes a strict regime of static control, using what the story calls Apollonian gaskets and forging these massive gilded cages of law. The whole goal is just to manufacture a breathless silence, a vault of frozen perfection. But the supreme irony is that in his desperate pursuit of order, Cynos merely succeeds in building a rigid, logical cage. And that cage functions as nothing more than a tomb of his own making. He's just sitting there completely isolated and breathless.
Act 2. Irony of the Crimson Mask.
But let's peek behind the curtain for a second, because the architect's grand isolation is built on a massive foundation of theatrical hypocrisy. Beneath those black robes, he wears a crimson mask. His so-called pure, cold intellect, that's just a 10% facade. The vast majority of his fractured psyche, like 90% of it, is a secret allegiance to blood-slicked chaos. That crimson color is such a visceral motif throughout the story, completely betraying his hidden, desperate desire for the very all-consuming maw he publicly claims to hate. And this right here is his classic tragic flaw. It's the profound, undeniable realization that his entire regime, the supposedly immutable architecture, is nothing but a fragile stage play masking his true chaotic nature. He fears the chaos, yes, but he secretly longs for the messy motion of reality. It's a psychological tension that simply cannot hold.
Act 3. Laughter as a jagged blade.
So this incredibly fragile stability completely shatters when a new character arrives on the scene, the Wit. And as the Wit, I don't need to use armies to break his walls. I just wield the unbinding power of the absurd like a divine weapon. Panel by panel, through mocking eyes, we get to watch as laughter slices through his heavy, manufactured silence like a jagged blade. Those rigid, logical cages Cynos spent so much time building, they are peeled away like dead skin. And the ultimate punchline to this whole cosmic joke is that the grandiose creed of the cosmic mind is revealed to be written in nothing more than disappearing ink. Now, what does that disappearing ink actually signify? It is the ultimate revelation that the rigid laws of the universe Cynos tried so hard to enforce were always just temporary illusions. The unbinding power of the absurd proves that logic itself is completely hollow when faced with the raw, chaotic truth of existence. When confronted, the grand cosmic page is just left utterly blank.
The Surreal Playhouse.
With the ink faded away, the story hits its massive visual and thematic climax. The once mighty fortress grotesquely transforms right before our eyes, and the pale void suddenly erupts into visceral color. We are witnessing the ultimate unmaking. The strict, rigid lines of the graphic novel just blur together, and the fortress becomes this surreal playhouse. That immutable architecture literally melts away into the logic of the crucible. Notice that stark shift in the color motifs again. The pale, cynic, stark black and white world suffers a slow, colorful death. The infinite, meaningless motion of the broth just rushes back in and entirely reclaims the space, washing over that rigid logical cage.
Which brings us to the very end of Cynos' tragic character arc. He starts at dawn as the arrogant architect of order, totally wrapped in his unearned majesty by midday. But by dusk, as the surreal playhouse violently takes over, he is stripped of every ounce of that majesty. He completely transitions from an architect of order to a submissive witness to the ruin of his own creation. And finally, in the night of the void, he's left with no choice but to perform a perpetual grave dance upon his own ruins.
In his final, brutal catharsis, the pale cynic is forced to acknowledge this one profound truth. The spirit of becoming, that messy, chaotic, beautiful motion he once feared and secretly desired, cannot exist inside a rigid, logical cage. It only thrives in the dark, fertile ground of the void. He has to submit completely to the colorful, chaotic reality of the universe. It's such a powerful, haunting story, isn't it? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to really chew on. What rigid logical cages and disappearing ink are you using to try and bind the messy, beautiful mischief of your own reality? Just think about that for a second before you step back out into the blood-slicked, colorful chaos of the real world. Thanks for learning with me today, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.